What is climate change? What is it about? Why should we be concerned? Let me try and explain a huge and complicated subject simply and briefly. Human activity is pumping more and more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. We produce CO2 when we drive a car or take a plane or run a manufacturing plant or use electrical appliances at home, because nearly all our electricity is generated from natural gas, which is a fossil fuel. The CO2 builds up in the atmosphere, it traps heat from the sun, and causes the planet to warm up. Already, the Earth's average temperature has gone up by 1 degree Celsius compared to pre-industrial times, over 100 years ago. 1 degree Celsius doesn't sound like much, but it is very significant. Furthermore, temperatures are continuing to rise faster and faster. Ice sheets in Greenland and Antarctica are melting into the oceans, and this is raising sea levels around the world. The UN currently projects that sea levels will rise by up to 1 meter by the end of this century. 1 meter, about 3 feet, is just 80 years from now. But the scientists' estimates have been going up, so sea levels may quite possibly rise higher and faster than that. Global warming is also making the weather more extreme. Droughts are getting more severe and prolonged. Rainfall and storms are becoming more intense. Singapore is already feeling the impact. Our weather is palpably hotter, rainstorms are heavier, and this will very likely worsen over the next few decades, within the lifetimes of many of us. A recent Swiss study found that by 2050, just 30 years from now, several cities in the world will experience unprecedented climate shifts, and it found that one of them will be Singapore. We must prepare for the impact of climate change on Singapore. There are many risks and consequences. New diseases, more frequent pandemics, food shortages, forced migration of displaced populations, even wars. And because we are a low-lying island, Singapore is especially vulnerable to one grave threat, and that is rising sea levels. In the 1960s and 70s, floods were common in Singapore, especially during the rainy season. That's why Uncle Ng Achai from Jalan Kayu, whom I told you about earlier, had to rescue so many stranded residents whenever it flooded. When we had high tides, monsoon drains in low-lying parts of Singapore would fill up almost to the brim, even if it wasn't raining. And if it did rain, it would flood. Gan Kim Yong told me when he was a child, his family lived in Hong Kong Street in Chinatown, where his father ran a shop. Hong Kong Street is next to this one. This one is Temple Street. But it looked like this also. When there was an exceptionally high tide, which happened a few times a year, the tide water would rise up from the drains onto the 5-foot way in front of the shop, even without rain. And so his father had to build racks to stack up the goods out of the reach of the water. To Kim Yong, who was then a boy, this was great fun. I don't think that is Gan Kim Yong. But actually, it was a serious matter. These old flooding problems are now largely resolved. We improved the drainage system. We required buildings to be built on higher platforms, at least 3 meters above the mean sea level. 3 meters sounds a lot, because a person, most of us are less than 2 meters tall. But 3 meters isn't actually that high, because at high tide, the water can go up 2 meters above the mean sea level. And that leaves only 1 meter buffer to cope with other factors. For example, heavy rain. So if it rains, it fills up a little bit, and you're still okay. And the water has somewhere to go. So because of this 1 meter buffer, we've managed to deal with our flooding problems thus far. But with global warming, if sea levels rise by 1 meter, our buffer is gone. Because when it's high tide, 2 meters above that, you're already water reaching the 5-foot way. We will have no more buffer. And if heavy rain coincides with a high tide, the water will have nowhere to go. And we will literally be in deep water.